Oi, oi, it's your boy, Jack Slack, Fights Gone By podcast, coming at you in a post-UFC 253 world, and we're going to be talking all about those fights. Not going to bury the lead, let's talk about him. Izzy versus Paulo Costa. Highly, highly anticipated fight. I said last week, I think my words were that I don't think he's the best test for Izzy, but I do think it's an interesting stylistic matchup. And no, he got smoked. he looked completely lost. I think Chael Sonnen said that he had no plan B, but that's exactly what I wanted to say too. You know, the way I put it in my post-fight breakdown, which you should go and read if you're a Patreon boy. If you're not a Patreon boy, join the Patreon because I need to fund my ridiculous betting on decisions habit. But I said in that article that basically Israel Adesanya took away the one path that Paulo Costa's always done without resistance. And Paulo Costa didn't have anything else. Like, it was, it's one thing to be like, that strategy didn't work. And I didn't used to be one of those people who was anal about strategy and tactics. I'll teach you anal tactics later. But the difference is strategy is an overall, is a larger scale thing, whereas a tactic is something you do to implement the strategy. So, what is it they say? You can have the tactic to retreat, furthering your goal or repositioning to do something else, but you can't go in with a strategy of retreat. So strategy is the big picture, tactics are the way you get there, basically. And Paulo Costa had like one tactic to get people to stand still along the fence, and it was his kicking him in the body with his right leg. The strategy of getting people along the fence and beating them up with combination punching and working the body, and then grabbing the double collar tie if it's there, could well have worked fantastically against Israel Adesanya. I mean, it makes sense if you've got a guy who's got great movement, is particularly skinny and long for the weight class, working the body and beating him up in an area where he has no space to move and use the slick angles and movement and timing and distance and time and measure, as I said in the article. Very sound on a ideas level. I think it's important to say up front that like this isn't I don't think that this proves that Costa's strategy overall wouldn't work against Israel Adesanya. This is like, if you now thought like, well, Paulo Costa tried to cut the ring on him, so don't even bother because it doesn't work. It's like the whole, he checked a leg kick, don't bother leg kicking him. We're talking about things in the moment versus things overall. We are well past the stage where you can go out and there's just a big weakness or like a button you can press in someone's game that will fuck them up, with the exception of people like Edson Barboza, who get to a very high level with a glaring hole in their game where they just back themselves onto the fence. But, if you watch the Filthy Casual's guide to this matchup, which I've since had to take down, or chose to take down just so the UFC don't copyright flag me, we talked a lot about ring craft, catching people against the fence. And I said that basically up to this point, Paulo Costa has not fought anyone who is good at staying off the fence to begin with. And I said that because I'm always very cautious to call people good ring cutters, because I don't think it's something that you can actually know about someone until they meet a defensive ring general. Someone who knows how to move, stay off the fence, someone who actually considers where they are in the cage. And there just aren't an awful lot of those in MMA. And that, combined with the large number of southpaws that Paulo Costa has fought, have sort of given him made him look like a much better ring cutter than he actually is. I said that he's got a lot of trouble if those guys go to his left, but also with orthodox opponents particularly, because he's not kicking into the open side, it's not as devastating. There's a whole number of things about kicking into the open side that we talk about, and I do say it quite a lot. And I'm just aware that, it's not a hard and fast rule. It's a rule like circle to the outside of the lead leg of the southpaw. It's a thing that is a rule of thumb for a reason. It makes life easier. If you're just going to kick for kicking's sake, kick into the open side, because it's going to be more difficult for the guy to catch. So if you're kicking into the closed side, like in this match, so Paulo Costa's orthodox, Israel Adesanya's orthodox. Paulo Costa throws his right round kick to the body. Israel Adesanya's lead arm is almost definitely going to be in the way anyway. If it's not in the way, he's probably picking it up, turning or sidestepping slightly with the kick and wrapping it, catching it, which is exactly what he did about 4 times in this fight. And he did it also while circling along the fence with his feet level, so he wasn't really in either stance, which was really nice too, because he'd been in southpaw and then he'd circle round with his feet sort of level so that he could turn his body and take the kick. Obviously, a guy competed in a load of Muay Thai and kickboxing matches, knows how to catch a fucking kick, and you see it in MMA. The thing is, in MMA, and I think this was the right approach at the time, I think back in the day, you had to be like, don't do that, you'll get your kick caught, and that's a takedown. And I think that was the right way to approach things. But we're now at a point where everyone's such a good, everyone at a good level is a competent wrestler. You can defend a single quite well, particularly like a loose single. Like if you kick someone and they catch it, they're not really on a single leg, they're on a caught kick. It's not a guaranteed takedown at all. And I think we have to like reevaluate the way we look at things and say that a caught kick is not the end of the world. Expect your kicks to get caught sometimes. And if you watch high-level Muay Thai, guys expect it. Not so much in kickboxing because you've got rule sets like Glory where there are very few benefits to catching the leg because you're not allowed to sweep. But in Muay Thai, you'll see catches constantly. The best kickers in the world get their kicks caught because they're also kicking against people who are used to being kicked by the best kickers in the world. But it doesn't stop the fight. They don't stand on one leg going, oh, fuck, oh, he's caught me dead to rights. I suppose I better take whatever's coming back. No, they're fighting on one leg. And I'm not saying like you have to be able to knock people out on one leg, but you can punch on one leg. You can drop in an elbow on the same side. You can enter a clinch. There are a lot of answers to having a leg caught. And Paulo Costa looked completely lost when he either couldn't land his kick because Izzy was too far away or controlling the distance beautifully, or got his leg caught and then when we talked about using the round kick to cut the cage last time, because I was saying that's what he's been doing really well against these southpaws, the round kick smacks into the body or the head, normally the arm, let's be honest, but it roots the guy, well, it doesn't even root the guy to the floor, it probably knocks him up out of his stance a little bit, but it stops him in his tracks, and then you come down swinging your hands. And there was that great clip I used in the Filthy Casual's Guide of Fedor doing it to Krokop along the ropes. Round kick on the arm, really hard, but you drop in and you dig like 3 or 4 shots to the body, or you start swinging your hands upstairs. You've used the kick to create, a downward spiral into Satan's dick hole for the opponent. However, by catching the kick, Izzy was able to, well, sometimes he caught it and it was just on the end because he'd been managing his distance really well anyway. So he'd just let him slide off. Sometimes he'd throw it by, sometimes he'd just let it drop to the floor. But a couple of times, and particularly the last one in the second round, he catches the kick and he starts combination punching back while Costa's on one leg. So it's gone from Costa has you covering up from the kick and starts punching to you've got him covering up and he's on one leg. I thought the kick catches weren't a huge part of his game in this one. Most of it was the distancing and the movement and the usual Israel Adesanya weapons, but I really liked how easily he picked off those kicks when they came. I didn't like how one-note Paulo Costa's offense was. He couldn't put a glove to Izzy most of the time because Izzy was controlling the distance. And we talked, again, read the article I waxed lyrical about time and measure. And I said, if there is no boundary, if you were fighting on a basketball court or whatever, the guy with the mastery of time and measure is going to win every time. Because, the thing you do to slow people down or to... it's not even a speed thing, it's the guy who can control the distance. But if someone is controlling the distance well against you, you have to make it more complicated. And that is where the boundary really helps. Getting them towards the fence or the ropes, corners, wall in a pub, push them backwards over a table, run them along the bar, clear all the pints off. But, if they're facing you and you're facing them and there's nothing around for them to run onto, you're going to have a really hard time. So anytime Costa thought he was close enough, he threw this right round kick, missed, or got it caught and got hit back. One of the most important things in trying to corner someone is being able to chew up distance. If you know that they're going to move away from you whenever you punch or pull their head back or just drop away or angle off, you've got to start putting out more. You've got to start putting out double jabs. The double jab, the idea of the double jab is not I jab him in the face and then I move forward and I jab him in the face again because we're moving at the same pace. The idea of the double jab is that it's just a hand pumping out there to chew up some distance. Whether that's to get you in or to move the guy back. And you barely ever see the double jab in MMA, which is particularly weird because, this is not a criticism that applies to Izzy particularly. The double jab can be used against good ring craft, guys who are going to cut angles off. You still use the double jab against them, but particularly in MMA where a lot of people still, it's I attack and you run backwards, then you turn it around and you run at me and I run backwards. It's on a line and we're both taking huge retreats to get out of the way. I think the double jab should really be more of a thing in MMA, but the double jab would have been a great idea for Costa. Front kicks to the body, lead leg front kicks would have helped him get, not getting his lead leg chewed up. Checking the hands because he was getting jabbed up, so just put both hands on their hands like he did to Uriah Hall, and raise the lead knee and come in behind it so you not get kicked in the leg. There are lots of little things that are tactics, or you could call them moves or techniques, but they're just little things to get you towards that goal of putting Israel Adesanya to the fence. And he didn't have any others. I wouldn't have minded if he tried a ton of other stuff and he couldn't do it. I'd go, God damn it, Izzy's even better than I think he is now. But yeah, Paulo Costa just had this one idea, and it comes back to that bully thing. Because Adesanya pretty much broke him mentally in this one, and I don't think it was from getting hit back. I think Paulo Costa's fine with that. I think it was not being able to hit that really broke his will. It's very discouraging to, most people are happy to take 2 if they land 1 back. Hell, take 3 and land 1 back, as long as you're landing 1 back. But he's taking 4, 5, 6, not landing anything good. And that will really just wear you down very quickly. Because, he had 1 round of that, maybe another half round of that, and by then he looked completely like he was not in it anymore. Mentally checked out. You saw a lot of work from Orthodox from Izzy in this one. Obviously, he's a bit like Bud Crawford. He can do both, but he tends to you can notice that he's gearing towards one or the other based on the opponent. But there's a lot of Orthodox work because, then you're dealing with the, Costa's rear leg is going towards your easy catch side, though you can catch a kick on the open side. These are not set in stone rules. They are just what is easier and what is harder, It's like we used to talk about shortening the path of techniques, and actually that comes up in this fight because you see Izzy adopt that pose that Sadiq Youssef does it too, and there's quite a few guys now. You stand a little bit squarer, you extend your right hand so that you're checking the path of the opponent's left because that's his quickest, and what you're doing is you're squaring your hips up so you are you're halfway to the low kick. It won't be as hard as if it comes from way behind you and you step into it, but you're halfway to it and you can just dig at their calf. But you're also coiled up to step in with a stiffer jab than you usually would. And those were the 2 weapons that he really did well in this fight, like the jab and the low kick. And they play off each other so wonderfully. And by squaring yourself up like that with the rear hand checking the opponent's jab, you put yourself in position to snipe with both quite well. And the low kick was a huge part of this fight. It's a huge part of every fight at the moment because guys are still having so much trouble dealing with it. And I said last time low kicks should be a big part of Costa's game, and I'm still going to, and I say every time Israel Adesanya fights, anytime you're dealing with someone who uses their legs a lot to get their head out of range and their body out of range, you kick their legs when they're moving because that's when their legs have to be doing the job of moving. So there was a great example, I think in the first round, maybe second round, but Costa landed 2 really good chopping low kicks as Izzy was retreating out of range, and then he went for a third, and Izzy just pulled his leg back into his stance. And a lot of people were like, well, you caught him twice, you're not going to catch him again. That's the end of leg kicks working for you ever in this fight. But no, I'm sure Adesanya would be the first to tell you, you react to how the opponent is fighting. If Izzy is retreating and pulling his head back from punches and you low kick him, it's because he was doing something else. If he knows you're going to low kick a 3rd time in a row, he's not going to get low kicked. But yeah, the low kick worked for Costa in the brief moments he stumbled upon it, basically. Whereas Adesanya was attacking the low kick consistently. And the reason that I say another reason that I say you should be using the low kick against Adesanya is that when you set up like that and you're using the low kick and the jab as your 2 point scoring weapons, not point scoring, you're doing damage, but you know what I mean, like one shot sniping or Russian roulette, both of those games, only one shot. But when you're doing that with the low kick and the jab, is he's using the low kick to take away the guy's boxing, to stop him doing the same thing with the jab. So if you start low kicking back, you can start to try and take away Izzy's jab. You saw in this fight, the more he kicked that lead leg, Costa started out in that big wide stance that he did against all those southpaws, and threw his leg from way behind him. And suddenly he's coming up shorter and shorter and shorter. And all of Costa's defense is like leaning back or retreating. And if he's standing very high, it's a lot harder for him to do that. So you can start picking him off with the jab or switch and throw the left straight. And the other really annoying Costa habit, which I mentioned in the article, it's something that he does and Priscilla Cachoeira and Jessica Andrade and tons of these Brazilian brawlers, and to be honest, American brawlers too, but particularly those three notable Brazilian brawlers, they've got a forward-moving style, but all of their defense is leaning back. You'll see it. Like, watch the Joanna Jacek, Jessica Andrade fight, watch any Priscilla Cachoeira fight. You're doing two things that don't synergize at all. Because when you move in, if you like slip inside a punch or you slip to the elbow side of the punch, or you duck under a punch, or you take a punch on your fucking forehead and it glides over the top of your head afterwards because it's not going to go through your head. You are then inside. But if you move your hips and legs in and you're pulling your head back while the opponent's jabbing, your head's still behind you. You're not in position to come in and hit afterwards. So it's a really weird habit. Andrade is the most notable for this because she'll reach for the people's jab way out in front of her while leaning back. And Costa was doing exactly the same thing in this fight. And the moment you start doing that against someone like Joanna Jacek or Israel Adesanya, they're going to throw that straight, maybe switch to southpaw, maybe just throw it to jab, and they're immediately going to kick you with the left leg because you're leaning back and your hand's away from you. And he caught Costa with, I think it was a left straight to a left high kick, and you saw Jacek land that jab to lead high kick like 3 times against Andrade. So Paulo Costa, like, there's a lot about his game. Like, if he can do the thing he wants to do, which is trap you against the fence and just swing, he's great. If you're a heavy bag, he's a murderer. Problem is, he has a real lack of tools to go about getting you there. And we were talking about how all his defense in the Hall fight, especially, and even in the McClellan fight and the Hendricks fight, he'll get you to the fence, and then if you attack him, he'll move straight backwards. All of his defense is like retreat. Now, sometimes that's good, like the left hook, the check left hook he sometimes does. But if you're trying to attack and put pressure and confront someone, you want to be able to move your fucking head or check their hands. Those are the two easiest ways to deal with this. Or push, kick them back, take them out of their stance. That was Bas Rutten's thing. He'd throw like a nice hard right low kick. Well, he didn't do anything soft. So nice right low kick, and then he'd step in to throw it again with a big telegraph and scoop it inside, like the reverse of the crescent kick, and go to a front kick instead. And throw his man backwards onto the ropes. Their legs are together. They're leaning against the ropes. He lunges in and starts swinging. He did that to Maurice Smith, who was a much more accomplished kickboxer than him. There's a lot of ways to close, but it's all complicated by putting that lead foot down. Like, the people are not going to let you walk up to them and punch them anymore. It's exactly the same with Israel Adesanya as it is with Alexander Volkanovski. So it's not even a height thing or a length thing or how big you are in your weight class thing. The guy, if he's going to put his lead foot in first, kick it, and then he won't, or he will, and you'll just debilitate his leg. But yeah, brilliant performance from Izzy. Very disappointing performance from Costa. Obviously, the whole bullying thing, I brought this up before, but brave enough to take a beating. Like, we knew that from the Romero fight. He came forward, got hit in the face, kept going. Just thoroughly outclassed in this one. So again, I got into it more structured, detailed, thoughtful prose on the Patreon. Go to thefightprimer.com to read that. But let's talk about some of the other stuff that I haven't discussed yet, because there was some interesting stuff on this card. And actually, on the subject of kicking into the open side versus kicking into the closed side, Jan Blachowicz kicked into the closed side against Dominic Reyes. Worked absolutely fine, because Reyes' lead hand was floating. He didn't bother catching the kick. And he took the brunt of the kick first anyway. It took him like 3 kicks to just stave in Dominic Reyes' ribs. It was kind of a weird fight, like any light heavyweight fight, but it was Jan with like I hate saying herky-jerky, but fucking herky-jerky is what Jan Blachowicz is. He's got a heavyweight upper body and like featherweight legs, so he looks really weird at all times. But he was doing like the running combinations, and Reyes was looking smooth, like trying to do his little spiral out to the open side and throw the left-hand counter. There was a lovely slip and counter left uppercut from Reyes, which is a weapon that we didn't really see until like later on in his UFC run. But yeah, got caught in an exchange with Jan Blachowicz, and Jan Blachowicz has been putting people to sleep lately. So yeah, Polish male UFC champion, first time, I believe. Fuck. Someone's going to bring in like, oh, do you not remember when Pavel Nastula beat Kevin Randleman at UFC 35.2 or something like that? It was a one-night event from Peru. Yeah, good on him. And Joanna Jacek going mental on Periscope from the Polish UFC studio was very endearing. Not really a whole lot to say about that, except like John Jones was threatening to come. I mean, he joked about going back and getting his title, but he probably will. Like Israel Adesanya pointed out, he's been talking about going to heavyweight for 10 years. He's still never done it. Now they're talking about Adesanya versus Jones. Fuck it, I wouldn't be opposed to it because when have you don't really see John wrestling as much as he used to. He keeps engaging in these kickboxing matches, and the last two he's lost or not, depending on whether you have him as your profile picture on Twitter. That's just generally the rule for if you should listen to what someone says. If they got a John Jones profile picture, no. Brandon Royval versus Kai Kara France was probably, one fight of the night, but it was one of the few that I really enjoyed on this card. It was pretty great. They came out, Brandon Royval got knocked on his ass. He was kicking wild, got hit in the face with, I think it was a right hand, fell onto his hands and butt, and tried to scramble up. I think he got pushed over again, and then he scrambled up and he did a spinning elbow as he did it, and Kara France walked right onto it. And then from there, the fight just descended into chaos. Just thinking about all those dudes who are like, actually, I watch flyweights because they're far more technical. And you're often like, well, no, it's just scrambly because they weigh nothing. But this one was just a fucking wild brawl. And Brandon Royval, it's interesting because we didn't get to see him strike as much in the Tim Elliott fight, which was most people's introduction to him. And we thought it was weird because he'd done so well in the grappling with Tim Elliott, who's really good. And he was like almost in tears in the post-fight interview being like, I'm sorry I couldn't strike more. Calm down, mate. You just won your UFC debut by finish against an established vet. And in this fight, you got to see a lot more of it. He wades in long 1-2s and knees after every strike, which I kind of like. It reminded me a bit of Lion Takeshi, who... I know, you're like, fucking Jack dropping weeb names again. But he was a Shuto champion. He turned up in Dream later on. But he had this very weird style. He used to wear like the shoot boxing pants, spats, whatever you want to call them. Whatever we call them that isn't tights, because you can't sell tights to men. And he used to do this very weird, he'd have his hands ready to punch, but he'd be shuffling he'd be doing almost like a little jog on spot with his knees, 1-2, just so that if someone shot in, they had a good chance of running onto his kneecap. And he did it against Miyata, who's a very good Japanese MMA wrestler, and he did it against Kaoluno, and he was an ancient Kaoluno, but he had decent success. He wasn't, I don't think he was as good a fighter as. Well, this is like 10 years ago, so he definitely wasn't as good a fighter as like someone like Royval or modern era fighters. But I remember thinking, oh, that's an interesting idea. And now watching Brandon Royval close every attack with a knee, it just reminded me that. And Austin Hubbard did the same thing against some of the grapplers he faced. He'd throw like an up jab or an uppercut into a high kick, and then he'd immediately drop the high kick leg behind him and bring it up with a knee again, because the up jab or uppercut will stand him up. You get a good chance trying to head kick him, and then they're going to be ducking on your hips afterwards. And he caught Marco Madsen with that right in the face. Honestly, that's something that I think that's something that you'll see a bit more of in the future, because obviously, I always say that Lucian Carvin quote where he was given a seminar somewhere. He's like, I don't understand why no one uses the knee. It's like atom bomb. But, I think anyone who's got like a kickboxing or a Muay Thai background loves knees. It's just that you can't apply them in that sort of you get less chances to do them in a nice clean clinch knee, and clinch knees are rarely clean anyway, but you don't want the guy catching it and you just throwing on your head, because that's not a huge deal in Muay Thai. It will look bad and it'll score against you, but you're not stuck on the bottom then for the next 3 minutes. But stepping knees and things like that are a little bit more dangerous to try, again, because of that. If you give up your balance, you've lost the next 2 minutes of the fight. As we said with the kicks, if you get a kick caught, you're almost guaranteeing a takedown, or you were back in the day. But finding new ways to use knees, really useful, because we all know like that was the striker's game plan from very early on. It was like, try and catch him with an uppercut or a knee. And I think trying to use those in more like you would close the door with the jab or the left hook on a combination. I think MMA fighters should be training to close their combinations, especially off kicks, with rebounding that foot off the floor into a knee. Because if they don't attack, great, you've just done a knee straight in front of you. You haven't lunged at them. You haven't given up position. But if they do move in, you've kneed them. Jose Aldo, in one of his phases, he was well into switch knees. And this phase was before he entered the UFC. Like, that was his thing. He just loved the switch step into the left knee. And he'd catch guys stepping in the chest all the time. It was Mike Brown and then someone before that too. He just smoked him with knees to the body as they stepped in. And then he just dropped the idea altogether. But if they didn't step in, he'd just let his leg flap out and try and kick him in the head. But yeah, Royval hit him with a couple of nice knees in this one. And then Kara France, he looked to be having a bit more success, and he ducked in to try and take Royval down, and Royval guillotined him, which, that'll happen. that's another Strikers Jiu-Jitsu 101. Get good at grabbing necks. Now, I was causing a stir last week by saying that I thought Kai Kara France had probably more potential than Riddell. I thought Riddell was a welterweight for some reason, but then I remembered that, Mustayev, also a lightweight, all those people are lightweights. So I think, his cap in the division is probably even worse, because the lightweight division is just killers all the way up, or all the way down, whatever you want to say. But Riddell won his fight here, and it was a weird one. Again, keeping with the theme of Brad Riddell having messy fights, he's fighting Alex De Silva. What was he called? Leko? Because he looks a lot like a black Stefan Leko. Honestly, if you follow kickboxing, or if you follow K1, particularly kickboxing, mainly what you saw was Stefan Leko getting knocked out. He did a lot of his best work in Amsterdam promotions, and then he'd come on early on the K1 card, and you'd be like, why is Stefan Leko here? You wouldn't know if you didn't check out his other shit. This was a weird one. You got De Silva came out, and he's throwing the side kick across the body. When you're both orthodox, and you throw the lead leg side kick to the lead leg, so you're crossing yourself, which is something Robert Whittaker does. I am not a huge fan of that. And I saw it go really badly wrong the other day. I think it was in the UFC. It might have been in one of the Cage Warriors events I watched this weekend. But I was thinking, oh yeah, that's that going wrong. Basically turning your back as you miss the kick, and then the guy lunges in with a left hook. But it was working all right here, and then he was using it to pick his leg up and step in with a left hook instead, and he could step in with his lead leg turned in, because he was doing a side-on-side kick thing. And it was working all right. He seemed to be giving Riddell a hard time early. Got top position, I think in round 1 and round 2. But Riddell, he looked tired early, but then his tired level seemed to stay the same. Some guys are breathing out their mouths in round 1, but they just stay that way for 5 rounds, whereas Alex De Silva looked really fresh and then just dropped off. And Riddell was doing something quite interesting, which was shifting in with his blows, shifting in with punches into a southpaw stance, and then dropping back, staying in the southpaw stance, and trying to counter on the open side. I liked that. As someone who's mainly seen messier performances from Brad Riddell, haven't watched any of his kickboxing stuff. Saw him against Yi Long. That came up again this week. Love Yi Long. People hated him because of the monk gimmick. You're like, the dude's just trying to make some money, and he's got an entertaining style, and he does weird shit. So yeah, this wasn't... Riddell's last 2 have been really fun, and this one was, I'd say fun, but not it got to be a bit grindy at points. And the highlight of this fight was John Anik beginning to tell the story about Brad Riddell's father, which I actually found quite interesting because I hadn't heard it, winning some medal that they've only given out 3 times in the last century. And he goes, I'm going to have to bail on the story because we might have a choke here. And I was like, that's it. That is how you transition away from telling your fucking story to the action, which is just fine. That if someone taught Bellator, if someone showed that to the Bellator booth, I think you could revolutionise the commentary over there, because they get stuck telling a story and then they'll just continue while Naaman Gracie is submitting John Fitch. Just still talking about the size of the dog in the fight. This one time when I took a young Hickson Gracie to the barbecue or something. It's not a hard balance to strike. Yes, there are times when it's interesting to hear background information on fighters. If the fight has hit a rut, the pace of it, or no one's looking like they're going to get anything going for a minute, they're on the fence, in a clinch or something like. Oh God, what was that fight? Knight versus Kimur. Just fucking full round of leaning on the fence in that one. Just really boring. But yeah, tell a story. Tell us something interesting about the fighters' backgrounds. Yes, love it. Don't tell us when they're trying to like finish the fight. Jake Matthews versus Diego Sanchez was sad. And I think it's interesting because this week it came out, or certainly Conor McGregor released text, and I hate doing, what's Conor McGregor saying now? What a wild guy. Oh my God, he's boxing Manny Pacquiao. Because that's literally every one of my friends. Not my non-MMA friends. When I see them, they go, hey, what do you think about this McGregor boxing Manny Pacquiao or Floyd Mayweather or whatever? He released some text where he was trying to get a fight booked against Diego Sanchez. And Dana White said, like, we would lose our promoter's license for that. But Dana White's still happy to have Diego Sanchez on the cards, still happy to use him. And it seemed a lot like, you know how WWE gives out scripts to their commentators that they're not allowed to say belt or title shot or whatever it is. You get a championship opportunity, you don't get a title shot. And it seemed like they might have given something out saying, do not mention any of the weird shit with Diego Sanchez. Don't mention the fact that he probably shouldn't be here. Pretend everything's just normal. Even as he goes back to his corner and Joshua Fabia's there just being weird. I need a full court press. But he's got Stephan Bonner in the cult now. Yeah. Just depressing. I said Jake Matthews, not much of a striker. Probably won't knock him out. Almost did anyway. Very sad. I hope this new group of people don't steal too much of Diego Sanchez's money. Particularly as it seems like their impact on his fights is probably less than, a real team. Salo Ribeiro, Greg Jackson and Mike Winklejohn, people like that. Definitely watch Joshua Fabia trying to square up to Matt Serra at a buffet during fight week. Because Matt Serra, he is a big lad now. He's never been shy about admitting that he loves the pasta and the pizza. But he looked like he could just eat Joshua Fabia. And Joshua Fabia is trying to like alpha on him. It's incredible. But again, I don't like laughing at Diego Sanchez's mental decline. So moving on. I think the last interesting thing on that card was Juan Spino against Jeff Hughes. I looked at this one and they came out and I went, oh, what the fuck is this shit? And my boy Alan Murphy, who does a lot of the work with KSW, he's the reason that I can do cool KSW videos for my Filthy Casuals guides and they don't get taken down. But he does a lot of work with KSW and he was putting up some pictures of Spino when he was wrestling in Mongolia. Oh no, I think it was in Africa. He was wrestling Senegalese wrestlers. But he was enormous. He was like 300 pounds. So it was quite impressive to see him relatively cut down in this fight. And then he actually looked really good in the grappling. His striking was not much to write home about. But lots of different takedown attempts. He did the head outside single, high crotch, whatever you want to call it. Tried to run the pipe, pulled it up, hit the inside trip, just like DC always does. Maybe not as nicely as DC, but it was pretty cool anyway. Hughes kept going to the turtle. Spino kept controlling his hands, chopping him down. Every time he got up, he'd take him down again. Kept taking his back, kept getting on top of him. Cut through his guard like butter. And then the finish was a scarf hold. And you saw him pass the guard with a knee cut. And the moment that his weight drops, you can see Hughes like getting winded. Because it's fucking horrible. If someone passes your guard and just sits straight through into that. Particularly judo dudes. Fuck me. And the scarf hold, like, if you're just grabbing it and yanking it like Alexei Olenek, typically for anyone but big heavyweights, it's not going to work. But if you get under the arm like you should, and you're just on the ribs, it's like any fighting. You're protecting your ribs because if you get hit in them, they're fairly flimsy and there's not an awful lot of muscle around them. If you drop a 260-pound body on that, you feel if you don't pop a rib, it at least feels like you're going to pop a rib. So he was pretty cool. There was also quite a lot going on this weekend. There was Cage Warriors, which I watched a good deal of. Mason Johns, or Jones, that's how the Welsh say Jones apparently, is good fun. He's just won, was that lightweight and welterweight title he now has. I don't know if he's the next Conor McGregor, to be honest, but I did enjoy him. He's a bit more hittable than McGregor, but fantastic left hook, really nice. A wicked left hook is still enough to make you a pretty good world-class boxer. So yeah, in MMA, if you've got a wicked left hook, you can go a good way on it. And then I think it was Ian Gary was good fun too. He actually did the Peter Ayert's style jab to high kick knockout. We were talking about it earlier with Izzy and Paulo Costa. But if you get the guy reaching to parry the jab, you just pop the jab and kick off the same side to the head. Peter Reyes knocked out Mighty Mo with that. He was really good at it. Yeah, he looked fun, Ian Gary. And then there was, well, keeping on the British theme, there was Polaris, which I haven't watched yet, but it was Polaris Teams. Haven't heard anything about it, haven't checked the news, but they were supposed to be bringing out a new idea that was like Quintet, but supposed to be better. I love Quintet, so they got some work to do there. And then there was a Bellator event in Milan, I believe, and they didn't have Alessio Sakara on the card, so they really suffered. But Fabian Edwards is in the main event. Haven't checked how that went. I'll catch up on it afterwards. And then Rising was on. Reina had a hard time beating some lass. I saw that one. Didn't see Kaya Sakara's fight. He was fighting some guy who had 50% winning rate. That's the thing with Rising, and has always been the thing with Rising. It's their few like wunderkins versus just jobbers from the Japanese regional scene. But I'll give it a watch and I'll let you know if anything good happened on it. In the meantime, we got an event coming up this weekend. We've got 2 Bellators coming out this weekend. I think one of them is just not really a Bellator, and then one of them actually they're both pretty shit. But Paul Daly versus Derek Anderson, it could be fun at least. But then what are you competing with? You're competing with Holm versus Aldana, where Jorgen De Castro and Carlos Felipe are the co-main event, and then Jermaine Durandamy versus actually that's the best fight on that card. Jermaine Durandamy versus Juliana Pena. Carlos Condit and Court McGee fighting for the 2008 title. Oh, and Loma Lukbunmi is fighting Jinyu Frey. Man, I'm only excited for the women's fights. Kill me. Let's do a couple of questions before we get out of here for this week. Hi Jack, 2-parter here. Oh, I don't know if I'll allow that. Wondering if there is anything shorter fighters can take away from Adesanya's style. I'm almost always giving up height and reach to my sparring partners. Is there anything I can learn from Izzy? And what other fighters would you recommend watching for shorter strikers? Thanks for what you do. Dana White looking more and more like a beefsteak tomato with every press conference, bless. From Randy. I think with Israel Adesanya and any lengthy fighter, there is, there are camps of people who are just like, they don't want to give anything you do credit if you are long and rangy, and yeah, I mean, if you were starting someone out in fighting, it would be great if they had a long, gangly frame. Whenever I meet someone who's like 6'5", 6'6", got really long arms, I'm like, oh, you do well in boxing or whatever. Which, there's no guarantee they would, but it is a nice starting point to have. But then if you meet someone who's 5'6" and built like a brick shithouse, they can do perfectly well at fighting too. I think that the important point is to realise that, yes, there are benefits to your build. Like, Israel Adesanya, when he leans back at the waist, it has got a bit more of a buffer zone there in terms of safety than someone who doesn't have the length and height that he does. And with reach, you've got obviously a longer area that you can jab effectively into and so on. But I think when you understand that there are a lot of ways to fight, like you could get in someone's chest and just grind them along the fence, and this doesn't apply to that. But one of the big principles that makes good strikers generally is distance management, and like I said in that article, time and measure, and that's true for everyone. If you're managing the distance to get to your goal, if you're a short guy, your goal might well be to close the distance because you'll be more effective at close range. You are not guaranteed to be more effective at close range. It's just a good starting place, and how most shorter fighters if there's a guy in a division who's particularly short there in kickboxing or MMA or boxing, they typically do better at close range. However, we can all name fighters who were long-rangey dudes who did surprisingly well on the inside, someone like Riddick Bowe in boxing. One I'm always thinking about is, well, two that I'm always thinking about are Saenchai and Manny Pacquiao, both smaller guys who have gone up in weight, several weight classes, to fight much, much taller, heavier, more powerful guys who are also longer and taller. And those guys both spend a good amount of time outside of their opponent's range. I think there's this weird tendency to look at it like you're the long guy, you want to keep the range and punish, because you've got less you need to step in to snap them on the end of your reach. But if you watch someone like Saenchai, he stands beyond the range of these guys who have like 3 heads height on him and then closes the distance very quickly. Or keeps backing up and lets them step in and he can close the distance even quicker. So I think getting bogged down too much in someone succeeding because of their height or their build is oversimplifying things, or rather just diminishing a lot of what they're doing to make it work. Things that you can definitely take from Israel Adesanya are his feints. Like, the man feints constantly. And it's something that's, I was using stills for this article because I don't like to use too many UFC GIFs on Patreon stuff. But it's difficult to capture in, stills how many feints he's using each moment. Some of them very obvious, like that when he steps up to throw a left high kick and doesn't throw it. But like the little shoulder feints, the little level changes to pump his shoulder at the guy, the little hip thrusts, all brilliant. And no one is using them as often as he is. And to be honest, almost no one, even at the highest levels, is using them well. I don't want to be like, I see stiffness there. But, we're still getting to a phase where guys are comfortable moving their head a little bit while they're striking and bouncing around a little bit. And I think a lot of guys worry about tiring themselves out by showing so many feints. I think a part of it is also overthinking the feinting stuff, because Israel Adesanya throws, 100 feints around. Probably doesn't, but, a lot of feints. I don't think he's setting everything up. I don't think he's setting anything up with each one. It's like his question mark kick comes up. If it clacks the guy over the head with their arms down by their body, great, you got a knockout or a knockdown. If it doesn't give a shit. And I think people overthink, like, setting up the knockout like that. He's just doing lots, feeding lots into the, feeding lots of information in, overwhelming you. And, so the feints are number one thing you can learn from him. Chewing up distance with feints particularly. Striking from both stances. Again, like I said earlier, can strike from both stances like Bud Crawford. But both of those guys have very specific habits of each stance. It's not can strike from both stances identically. It's can strike to gain the benefit of being in either stance, or gain a benefit from being in either stance. Actually, I meant to talk about punches on the eye in this one. I forgot to mention it, because the knockout in the Costa one was like a left hook that caught him just on the side of the eye, and then there was a really bad... And then there was the one where Alex De Silva thought he got poked when Brad Riddell hooked him in the eye. And it reminded me of back in the olden days of boxing, they used to talk about the bulb. Because the chin being a knockout point was quite a trendy new idea when John L. Sullivan came along. He claimed that he'd come up with the idea because a doctor had told him how many nerve endings were in the chin. I think that's probably bollocks. Guys have been hitting each other in the chin for years. But that was like very trendy because it used to be all the temples and the eyes. And I think it was Jack Johnson, Joe Chewinski. He knocked him out with a left hook on the eye. And they referred to it as the bulb. So yeah, learn that. But no, like the feints, and particularly the use of the low kick. We're focusing on Adesanya's like counters and shit like that. But he and Alex Volkanovski, who are polar opposites in build, even within their own divisions, have both had success doing the same thing, taking away the opponent's boxing by kicking their lead leg, and then applying their own boxing while their opponent is too busy worrying about their own lead leg. I think when you get hung up on range and height, you're thinking about like someone like Sonny Liston or Lennox Lewis pumping out a jab and it just hitting the guy from miles beyond his reach. And those are extreme examples. But if you can do stuff well, one of my favourites is Tommy Loughran versus Primo Carnera. Primo Carnera didn't have a bad jab. He wasn't a great boxer. He wasn't as bad as they all claimed, but he had a decent jab. But he had 100 pounds and half a foot of height on Tommy Loughran. Tommy Loughran jabbed his fucking face off. And it was really nice to watch. Just his manipulation of timing, when he was going to enter. He's got this very side-on, bouncy stance. He looks like Stephen Thompson, basically. But, all Tommy Loughran did was the jab. That was his whole career. He was basically a one-handed fighter. But he got so good at manipulating timing and stepping in that he's boxing up this guy with huge height and reach and weight advantages on him. So I'd say, yeah, you can learn something from Israel Adesanya. Maybe you could learn more from watching someone who has similar height disadvantage in their division than you. But even then, if you want to fight more like someone who wants to fight out of range like Israel Adesanya, you don't need to look at Joe Frazier or Mike Tyson overcoming taller opponents. Look at someone like Manny Pacquiao or Sanchez, where they are working from the outside and coming in for flurries and then re-establishing the distance. Cheers, Randy. Right, I reckon that'll do us for today. I will probably be back on Thursday. If not, I've got something cool lined up, Filthy Casuals quickie-wise. If you want to support the podcast, get in on the extra stuff we do for the patrons and read/listen to that post-fight breakdown of Adesanya versus Costa. Sign up to the Patreon. If you want to send an email to the podcast, fightsgonebypodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to see what I'm writing at any time, fightprimer.com. I'm your boy Jack Slack, working the bulb like a speed bag bless.